Before the Dreaming, Chapter 1. Hushed Streets. Mira stepped out of her building, the door clicking shut behind her. The streets were quiet, almost too quiet. Cracked sidewalks stretched ahead, streetlights flickering weakly, and the air carried the faint temps of ash and dust. She walked slowly, taking in the ruined city, burned-out cars, scorched walls, buildings leaning like tired old sentinels. The river that once ran clear through the city now slithered gray and sluggish, thick with sediment and refuse. Even the wind felt heavy, as if it carried the exhaustion of the world itself. At first, she thought she might be alone. But as she followed the cracked road toward the square, figures began to appear. One by one, then in pairs, then in small groups. A subtle pull seemed to guide them, drawn toward the pods that gleamed faintly in the square ahead. "They say it's all gone," a voice whispered. Her neighbor had fallen into step next to her, eyes flicking nervously to the edges of the growing crowd. "Gone?" Mira asked, though she already knew. "Not just buildings," he said. "Rivers poisoned, forests dead. The sky, it doesn't feel like it used to. People, they're not running from death anymore. They're walking toward it or something beyond it." Mira's eyes lifted to the pods. Smooth, silent, and impossibly still, they had been there for years, waiting. The strange structures, once thought of as architectural constructs, had now become arcs of humanity, vessels, holding the hope, memory, and imagination of a world on the brink of collapse. From the edge of the gathering, a woman's voice rose, clear and sharp. "They built this place long before the collapse, before the earth burned, not to escape death, but to escape entropy. They thought if they could preserve the dreaming mind, they could preserve creation itself." Mira's heart caught. "Who are they?" she asked. "They called themselves the architects," the woman said. "Not gods, not saviors. Just minds advanced enough to see what we couldn't, that the end was coming. They knew that thought, memory, imagination, these were the only things that could survive the collapse. So they created the dream vessel, a shared field of conscious reality. But they didn't stay. They left the keys behind. For us." Mira's gaze swept the streets again. The city was crumbling, yet the crowd pressed on, faces pale, eyes distant but resolute. She felt the pull herself, a subtle tug at the edge of her mind. A whisper of possibility beyond the collapse. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. The woman's eyes softened. "No one can know until they step inside. But stepping is not surrender. It is choice. And sometimes, choice is all that remains." Behind Myra, Leora's shadow shifted, her gaze sharp, measuring. Somewhere else, Kale moved through the crowd. Calm and steady, a quiet current threading through the tension. The pods waited, the earth waited. And Mira understood, with slow, terrible clarity, that the dreaming was not escape. It was the only chance left to remember what had been in, imagine what could still be. Before the Dreaming. Chapter 2. Leora's perspective. Leora leaned against the crumbling wall of an old library, the edges of her coat damp from the morning mist. The city sprawled before her like a corpse in slow decay. Windows gaped open, seeming empty and dark. The streets were scarred with soot and frost. The river through the middle of the city ran sluggish and gray, a mirror to the sky's bruised color. She had seen enough to know that the collapse was more than ruin. It was quiet erasure. And yet, here they were, people moving steadily toward the pods, as if drawn by some invisible current. "Why do they go willingly?" she murmured, mostly to herself. Her voice echoed against the empty walls. "They know what they're leaving behind." She pushed off from the wall and began walking, her boots crunching over broken glass and frost-scarred pavement. The streets stretched ahead, scarred and silent, yet the faint hum of movement reached her ears. A growing rhythm, subtle but insistent. A boy, no older than 13, stepped past her. His hair was matted with grime, clinging to his forehead, and his coat hung loosely on his thin frame. It frayed at the cuffs. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and there was a spark in them, maybe curiosity, or perhaps a defiance that seemed out of place in the gray streets. He clutched a tattered notebook to his chest. Its cover was worn with edges curling, seemingly as if it contained the last remnants of his world. Are you scared? He asked. His voice, though tentative, it carried a quiet weight that belied his age. Leora shook her head. Not scared. Just watchful. The pods, they're not just machines. They're mirrors. The boy frowned. Mirrors of ourselves, she said, stepping closer, her voice low but unwavering. Of what we've lost. Of what we might become. People think they're going to escape the collapse, as if stepping into a pod could wash away the decay around them. But the collapse isn't outside. They carry it inside them. Every fear, every regret, every compromise that we've made. It clings to us like shadowed skin. Her gaze drifted to the square, where the crowd was swelling. The steady hum of footsteps seemed like the pulse of the city itself. The pods gleamed faintly, smooth and unyielding, their silence almost accusatory. They built this, Leora whispered, mostly to herself, as the boy kept pace beside her. She barely noticed him now. She was so caught up in the weight of the thought. Long before the fires, before the skies turned gray. The architects, they understood something we still can't grasp. That thought survives what flesh cannot, and memory survives what the world forgets. A man brushed past, muttering about the strange things he imagined might happen inside the pods. Leora watched him go, feeling the subtle distortions in the air. The way shadows flickered too long. The way reflections shifted in puddles, never quite matching reality. As she walked through the rundown and desolate city street, she tightened her grip on the shard she carried in her pocket. A small fractured mirror that pulsed faintly with what she called truth. It reminded her that witnessing was its own resistance. Seeing the fractures, naming them, was how she stayed anchored. Somewhere behind her, a child laughed. High, clear, and out of place in the heavy gray of the city. Leora's eyes narrowed. Even the smallest joy could be a lie here. Or even a warning. The pods were more than vessels. They were thresholds, and the people walking toward them were testaments to quiet surrender. Leora didn't yet know if she would follow them into the pods. She only knew that she wanted to watch, and learn, and remember what the world had been before it faded completely into dreaming. Before the dreaming. Chapter 3. Kel's perspective. Kale sat cross-legged on a worn stone step of the old library. Its doors were sealed now, its windows dark and crusted with grime. Long since closed, nobody read anymore. The shelves inside, once filled with words and worlds, had been left to dust and silence. The pillars at the entrance, once white, were veined with cracks, their carvings of vines and constellations worn to faint impressions beneath years of rain and soot. A shattered dome crowned the roof, little more than a rusting lattice of iron ribs clawing at the sky. Through the gaps, the wind whistled faintly, carrying the smell of rot and wet stone. Inside, whole aisles of books sagged against one another. Their spines collapsed, their pages curling in damp piles across the floor. Fungus spread across bindings, pale fingers crawling over forgotten words. Water dripped steadily from the broken dome into the ruins of the reading hall, where long tables had splintered and warped under the weight of neglect. The silence around the library felt heavier than most places in the city, as if the voices of centuries, once gathered here, had long since fled and left behind only dust, mildew, and the echo of absence. Beyond the steps, however, silence gave way to sound. The steady shuffle of countless feet rose in the streets, a low tide of movement drawing people toward the pods. Their murmurs drifted on the air, half-formed prayers, nervous questions, small fragments of songs once sung to children. The noise was not loud, but it carried a strange persistence, like the beat of something inevitable. Every so often, the air trembled with another sound, deeper, subtler, a hum that seemed to come from nowhere, or everywhere at once. It moved along the bones of the city, resonant and low, like a great engine hidden beneath the earth. Some swore it came from the pods themselves, breathing in slow rhythm, alive in ways no one dared name. Kale narrowed his eyes, listening. The vibration was real enough. He could feel it through the stone beneath him, but what unsettled him wasn't the sound itself. It was the order to it, the way it rose and fell with a rhythm that seemed designed. He tried to measure it against the shuffle of the crowd, against the natural groan of the old city, but it did not match. It was too exact, too deliberate. Was it mechanical, Biological? Both. He found himself counting the intervals, noting how the hum seemed to shift slightly when more people pressed closer to the pods, as though the things were responding. That thought unsettled him, but it also drew him deeper into observation. The sound was not random. Something was being communicated, he just didn't yet know what. The library, ruined and silent, stood apart from it, all a monument to memory. The crowd, moving like a single body, pressed on toward a different kind of memory, one that waited inside the pods. A shadow moved at the edge of his awareness. Myra, someone he had known since the streets were still filled with children's laughter, had fallen into step near him. Quiet, cautious, her presence was almost unnoticed, yet it grounded him. A tether to something familiar amid the strange, humming intensity of the square. Cale flexed his legs, letting the stiffness in his knees ease as he pushed himself upright from the worn stone step. His eyes lingered on the ruined library for a moment, a quiet acknowledgement of absence and memory before. He turned toward the growing crowd. Step by step, he descended from the threshold, moving with deliberate calm, threading between the shuffle of feet and the low hum of the pods. Myra fell in beside him naturally, her presence steadying, a silent reminder of the familiar amid the unfamiliar. You feel it too, don't you? Mira murmured, her eyes flicking to the nearest pod. Cale nodded, hesitating. The hum? It's like it's alive, or listening. She glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Listening, yes, but to what? To us, to the past, or the future. He shook his head slightly. I don't know, but I can feel it, like it's waiting for something. For someone? Mira's gaze swept across the pods. Then maybe it's waiting for more than one of us. Cale stepped into the circle of pods, each humming faintly, alive in subtle, unplaceable ways. He let his fingers brush along their smooth surfaces. The vibration shifted with each touch. Some pods pulsed faintly warmer. Others hummed in slower, deeper rhythms, and one quivered almost imperceptibly, as if responding to his thoughts. He paused at a pod at the far edge of the circle. It pulsed with a deeper, uneven rhythm, almost hesitant, as if aware of his approach and deciding whether to respond. He stepped closer, careful not to jostle the crowd, and let his palm hover just above the smooth surface. The moment he touched it, the world shifted. Not outside, not in the square, but inside him. A faint shimmer traced across his vision, colors and shapes folding and unfolding in impossible geometry. He felt as if he were walking along threads of memories on his own. Some not but tangled, overlapping, fragile, and endless. He blinked, and a voice cut through the shimmer. You're curious. Cale's gaze snapped to the stranger stepping closer from the edge of the square. A man with dark hair, clean cut, and piercing blue eyes that seemed to see more than Cale could comprehend. His presence was taut, deliberate, part cryptic guide, part prophet, moving with a confidence that suggested he knew the lattice in ways Cale could not yet imagine. The pods, the stranger said, voice low, measured, almost carried by the hum itself. They are not what you think. They observe, they respond, and they remember. Cale swallowed words, failing him. They showed me something, he said cautiously. A vision, or a memory, maybe. The stranger's gaze sharpened. Then you have touched the lattice. Not many can, not without consequence. You felt its pulse, its awareness. You glimpsed the threads. Why me, why now? Cale asked, a shiver running through him. Because it is time, the stranger replied. Calm, deliberate. And because you are already threading yourself into it. The pods will not force you, but they will respond to those who reach. To those who notice, to those who dare to see. Cale's eyes drifted to the pod again. Its surface shimmered faintly in response to the stranger's words. The lattice was no longer distant, it was present, conscious, waiting for engagement. The stranger tilted his head slightly, watching. Step closer, he said. Not to touch, not yet. Just step closer and see. The first lessons are not in touching, but in perceiving. Cale exhaled, heart pounding, and moved forward, Myra at his side. The air thrummed around them. A pulse they both felt, together, he asked quietly. She nodded, fingers brushing his lightly. Together, she whispered. Every sense stretched outward, drawn into the lattice of memory, possibility, and subtle warning that hung in the square around them. He paused at a pod that trembled faintly, its hum deeper than the others, and felt the first true stirrings of a connection forming a fragile, electric thread linking him to something vast, alive, and unknowable. Kel's fingers itched toward it, and for a moment the square itself seemed to hold its breath. He took a careful step closer, and the world waited.